The BAC Strikemaster flies out into War Thunder. Let's check it out. During the 1950s and 60s, the post-war British aviation industry went through a very complex spiderweb series of mergers and acquisitions, which led to one aircraft sometimes being produced at the same factory by the same people, but under the name of several different companies during the production run. Eventually, the British Aircraft Corporation found itself producing the Jet Provost trainer aircraft, which itself was a jet-powered derivative of the earlier Percival Provost, which was actually one of the few piston-engine aircraft to successfully get converted into jet power. Well, BAC recognized a market for a cheap, light attack aircraft that could serve both as a trainer jet and low-intensity combat operations for air forces operating on smaller defense budgets or with only simple requirements. To this end, the Jet Provost T5 was used as the basis to develop a new light attack jet, which would eventually become the Strikemaster. The new Strikemaster featured a pressurized cockpit, a Rolls-Royce Viper engine, 4 external hardpoints under the wings, light machine guns in the wing roots, various structural reinforcements, and a conventional design that looked completely outdated when it first flew in 1967. Well, between 1967 and 1984, 146 of them were built for 10 different export customers, with most being retired starting in the early 1990s due to structural fatigue. They were used operationally in combat by Ecuador and Oman, but very few are still flying today, and most airworthy examples are in civilian hands. The Strikemaster may have been bordering on obsolete in terms of its performance and combat capabilities, but it was well ahead of its time in terms of its economic market and operational niche. While its combat record was pretty minor, the success of the Strikemaster on the international market was a strong motivator in the development of a bunch of different modern light attack aircraft. What we get in War Thunder is the Strikemaster Mk.88, a strike aircraft in rank 4 of the British Air Tree at battle rating 6.3. This is the main aviation reward for the end of 2023 Battle Pass season. The jet's primary armament is a pair of 7.62mm light machine guns. Oh boy, not even any ammo belt selection. For comparison's sake, there are a couple of rank 1 biplanes that have more firepower than this. That's okay though, because the loadouts the Strikemaster gets give it some credible weapon options. It can take gun pods, still 7.62mm though, a few different types of unguided rockets, and dumb bombs. It's worth mentioning that in addition to the rocket pods, it can take small racks of unguided rockets in between the weapon pylons for a little extra firepower. Now, speaking of rocket pods, its two choices are the Sneb-23 and the Mighty Mouse. The Mighty Mouse rockets have a larger warhead, but you can take a lot more of the Sneb rockets, so for my 5 cents, they're the obvious choice given how difficult both of them can be to aim. With the bombs you get, only the napalm is going to be able to take out a base in air battles, but they're still basically useless for anything else, so that's something to consider when you're creating and selecting weapon loads. It's also worth mentioning that if you can land a direct hit, it only takes 2 of the napalm bombs to blow up a base on most air maps. The regular bombs are going to be a lot more useful for taking out individual ground targets, like AI units in an air battle map or tanks flying as close air support. In terms of flight performance, the Strikemaster's pretty odd. It's a bit underpowered and has very poor acceleration, which ends up holding it back in a lot of situations. But its top speed is well over 700 kilometers an hour, so if you get some time to build up airspeed, it's possible to outrun basically all of the super props that you're going to get tiered into most of the time. Generally speaking though, this plane is going to feel very slow, and its rate of climb isn't especially impressive either. Well, that sounds like a lot of complaints, so what's the good news? Well, it has reasonable medium-speed energy retention in horizontal turns and maneuvers, but crap energy retention in vertical maneuvers. And it's reasonably agile at high speeds. Plus, it's got an incredibly low stall speed, so if you get sucked into some lame horizontal scissors nonsense, you might be able to get a good maneuver kill out of it. But keep the poor acceleration in mind, and remember that an entry-level jet like this is incredibly vulnerable in low energy states, significantly more so than the super props it gets matched into. Now, another high point is that this jet has a very good rudder. Its rudder authority is responsive and pretty strong, which is unusual for a low-tier jet like this. Not some huge advantage, but it's better enough to be noteworthy. Also, the Strikemaster has air brakes that it can deploy under the wings, so if you're going in for a diving attack or something, they can help manage your airspeed to avoid control lockup. As always, taking external loadouts can significantly impact basically all areas of your flight performance, so keep that in mind. Flying the Strikemaster in air battles might seem similar to other low-tier jets, but it's not. Your primary machine guns are almost useless on their own, so if you want any hope in air combat, you're going to need to take some gun pods. Realistically, at least 2. So that eats up valuable hardpoints and introduces some noticeable flight performance penalties, which isn't what you want in air combat. However, if you do go out with the full load of bombs and rockets, you're almost helpless in air combat because those 2 wimpy light machine guns just don't have enough firepower to bring down targets without lucky pilot snipes or significant time on target, and usually whatever you're shooting at just isn't going to cooperate. Even with the gun pods, the low firepower on this jet really holds it back. For example, given that it's got an air spawn, you might think that it's a natural option and a pretty good tactic to try and climb out for bomber interception and scratch some Ju-288s, right? Well, you can, but this jet ends up being really vulnerable to direct fire from gun turrets, and its low firepower means that you have to put a lot of hits into a bomber-sized target in order to bring it down. Add to this, kill stealing is still a big problem in air battles, so if you think you can just set a bomber on fire and then fly away because it'll crash eventually, well, get ready for an assist. So you get the choice of pumping the bomber full of ammo and staying in its gun turret's field of fire, or veering off after some crits and risking a kill steal. Not a great choice. Against fighters, the news is a little better, and it takes less hits to bring them down, but you still need a lot of time on target. In terms of tactics, it's not interesting to watch, but I was most successful using really slow-paced cat-and-mouse positioning rather than the usual turn-and-burn combat that War Thunder matches tend to incentivize. This plane just isn't very survivable unless you keep your energy maxed out at all times, which means long gun passes with minimal maneuvers, and to disengage for separation after only 1 or 2 turns to avoid energy loss, especially against super props. Being totally frank, I didn't find this jet very fun to fly in air battles. In terms of close air support, things are a bit better. It's easier to get the jump on enemy aircraft, and its air-to-ground weapons are reasonably effective against enemy tanks in its BR range. No ballistics computer or anything, so you're aiming on nothing but gut instinct. Still, with a little practice, this is better in close air support than most other entry-level jets, and again, it doesn't take many spawn points to get into either. Visually, the Strikemaster's almost a cute-looking little plane. Remember, this thing was a trainer that they strapped some weapon pylons onto, which gives it a very basic, kind of rounded appearance. The paint job is nice too, and overall, it's not a bad-looking jet. Landing is really easy, especially considering that this jet has an incredibly low stall speed. You can safely drop gear and flaps at around 275 kilometers an hour, but it doesn't have a drag chute, so don't forget to lock up the brakes. The cockpit, the view is cluttered, the bracing is really obstructive, and you've got a co-pilot sitting next to you. The visibility is simply inadequate. The instruments are simple to find, but overall, this just isn't a good cockpit for flying into combat. To close out on the Strikemaster Mk.88. This jet has good loadout options for external weapons, it has good horizontal energy retention, it has a responsive rudder, and it gets premium bonuses. However, its guns are just not enough, it has no ballistics computer, and it's generally just underpowered. The final verdict on the Strikemaster is that this jet feels better flying above a ground battle than flying in air battles. If you need a low-tier jet for close air support in your British tank lineup, this is probably the best option. But for any other use case, there are superior choices out in the tech tree. As always, thanks for watching.